Good evening. My name is Tyrone. Now, sometime heavy T, and I will be your news analyst for this evening. This is my table. Yes, that's my table. And I'd like you to note that as I undertake to analyze the news and to tell you exactly what it means, even while I am undertaking this arduous, death-defying feat, I want you to notice my sleeves, nothing, my coat, that no time during tonight's performance does my brain leave my head. The news team, or it was, I guess, the producers, or sometimes after the show, the first part, it's either them or the janitors, selected several items from the news that they thought would be apropos to analyze. It's either that or they picked up some that they figured I'd look at, and I don't have any idea what it means. Here we go. Everyone that was listening good to the news tonight, I assume you heard, recognized several items having to do with the collective intelligence of man, and sometimes metaphorically referred to as the herd, with no offense to our bovine brothers. And about the certain kinds of limitations that go on with ordinary people. And since this is obviously from looking at you and from you looking at me, we know we're not ordinary people. So we don't have to worry about insulting one another, right? Who was that went moo? But taking yourself as an example in the past, before you came to your senses, of being an ordinary person and that you only knew what ordinary people know and that you're just as sane and reasonable and rational as ordinary people are, then you know what the, shall we say, certain possible limitations of that sort of thought can be. And the underlying hint to all of this is get out of town. Know is that you can expand the way you think. And religion and philosophy and metaphysics and flying saucers and all forms of neat drugs throughout history have been in use for that self-same attempted reason. The implication again being, you should have gotten out of town. No, that it's possible, only possible to do it outside of the institutional collective methods I just mentioned, such as religion and mysticism, or the physical ones, like drugs. That they will not do what people want them to do, which is why the collective continue to use them. So, having said that, I'm going back to the kitchen and let somebody else wait on you. All right. I was trying to find some decent starting place, which in itself is a laugh. A starting place. Well, there's one news item they didn't pull out to pick up from last time. Might get us segued into it. The news item, I'll just roughly quote as best I remember it, was pointing out that inasmuch as all human activities, all intellectual activities, never succeed, that is, they never fulfill, they never complete their own stated premise, their purpose. They cannot, or they would be suicidal, which is just the intro. There's nothing wrong with that. But the way it turns out is they come into existence and then fulfill other purposes that are never recognized, and certainly never stated, but they're never recognized by people. And the example was given. It said, for instance, philosophy stated purpose originally to discover the truth. But what it did was discover itself. Would you consider that to be an intro? Now, then let's go from that to several of these. Well, I'm going. Just a minute. It's hard to pick out the first one to start. Part of the benefit of being in the herd, being part of a herd, being ordinary, being part of the collective intelligence of man, that is the extent of what you know. Part of the benefit of being part of the herd is that then individually you do not need wide sight. If you're a part of a herd, you do not have to look. Now, we could have slipped up on it and said you don't have to look as much. It'd be like being part instead of being, if you want to go from considering the symbol of a cow being representing you to something less feral. Let's let a man represent you, small m. That you would think the difference between if you were sent out as a scout into new areas, you would have to, if you expect to live long enough to collect your scout pension, is you got to stay alert. You're out there, new territory, who knows what sorts of possible antagonists. But if they sent you out with a whole company, there's 10 or 12 people and you all ride together, then it's like 24 eyes. 12 sets of eyes. 24 eyes. That you don't have to look as much. Now, we could have said that about this herd. Let me reread it. Part of the benefit of being part of the herd is that individually you do not need wide sight. And then the immediate analyzation I was trying to give you is it's not that you don't have to look as much if you're part of the collective consciousness, the collective intelligence of man. You don't have to look at all. Which is the only way it makes it interesting, because if we went with the first part, then this, you could take the news item as simply being philosophy. You could always weasel out. And you could say, well, that would be part of being more intelligent or being more conscious, would be that you did more of your share of looking rather than let other people intellectually look. But that would infer the weasel way out. That infers, of course, that you have the ability to look some, and that you do look some. As long as you're part of a collective intelligence, you don't even look, because you don't have to look. Why would you look? It's just all the cows involved if they're questioned. If you stop a herd or you jump, assuming you can stop a herd, but if you drop down in the middle of a herd and you just turned at random to a cow and said, are you watching where you're going? Every cow in there, we'll assume all the cows are sane. Every mother's son of them will say, are you nuts? Of course I know to see where I'm going. And what can you say to that? You're going to tell a wide-eyed, sane-looking, everyday, middle-class cow, going to look him right in the face, and he's moving along. He's not tripping. He's not getting hurt. He looks nice and fat and healthy, got on this year's fashion, and you look him right in the eye, and they're still moving along. You say, you don't ever look where you're going. Because I don't know how you'd be so foolish, but you do know that if his tail will go around far enough, he's going to just flip you away, because you're obviously insane. But anyone who has ever got a glimpse of certain matters knows that as long as you're part of the intellectual collective, not insane, not nuts in the ordinary sense, but part of the mainstream herd of life, you don't have to look where you're going. You don't ever look where you're going, because if you start looking where you're going and you're actually part of the herd, it begins to chafe. They begin to rub up against you. It's like as long as the herd's going, or those of you, if you like it more airborne, to look up and see hundreds of birds or bees, thousands, and they're all going like this, and then they suddenly go like this, and they go like that. And you think, Jesus, who in the hell choreographed that? There's still ornithologists and biologists, last time I checked, or last time I'm sure you did, still trying to consider, how does that head goose get the word back to all the rest of those gooses? How do they know that? I mean, how does he say left, 17 degrees. You know, give them some idea of the altitude and the attitude and what they're going to do. The herd knows what it's doing. There was another news item in here somewhere that pointed out that you could look upon the collective life of man intellectually as a gigantic, cosmic, plagiarized ventriloquist act. And that you do not want to hear who is playing the part of the dummy. Because you could tell people that and they will look you right in the face and say, well, don't look at me. I'm sure you're not talking about me. See, the sane are always protected. Always. They're never stuck for an answer, and they're protected. It is only the insane. It is only some poor goose that's flying off sort of sideways and looks like Daffy Duck, that if you holler, you crazy bird, they'll go, oh. But if you holler at the rest of them, you holler at something like, we're going to take a shot at every crazy bird up there, they all know you're not talking about them. Or they may defend it, but they won't take it personally. If you're part of the herd, you will be sane without thinking about it. Because if you were still part of the herd, if we could have it both ways, which we couldn't, but if you can hear me for a second, if you were actually in there in the herd, and just everyday people or cows, and I wish Sly Stone would quit writing. I do not pay royalties, especially to somebody in jail or under serious indictment. If you were an ordinary cow right there in the middle of the herd, trampling right along, and for some reason begin to think, I don't like where this is going, or for whatever reason, I think I'm going to, next time it moves to the right, or you've been kind of banged to the right now for days, and you think, I'm going to push this way. You've got to know what will happen. That's part of what ordinary artists are, was another news item. That the way the arts ordinarily run is a man attempts to spit while apparently not using his own mouth. That was a nice version. Another version is a man attempts to give you the finger and not use his own hand. So that you look around and you think, where did that come from? It would be like a cow in the middle of the herd where I was, trying to do something differently, and he wants to be able to do it differently without the rest of the cows continuing where they're going and begin to really rough him up. Not that they necessarily mean to. But if you've got millions and billions of cows going this way, and you're right in the middle, and they may not have a thing against you personally, they may not even know you, and you start trying to push this way, you're in for a hard time. You'll either go nuts, get crushed, or if you're ordinary, you kind of come to your senses. It doesn't take but a second. You understand, don't do that. That is the benefit from that view of being part of the herd, is that individually you do not have to have sight. Since we've already touched on art and thinking, when one would-be cow thinker read, saw a description of mystical enlightenment, somebody understanding something out of the ordinary, is just using their kind of terminology. And he read the definition, the description of mystical enlightenment, or enlightenment if you want to drop the mystical, as being, quote, a new union between a man and reality. The guy thought. I'm not sure an additional joining up with something is what I need. I'll get to that in a second. The other, sort of related, I think, is another way that the dance, the movement of the herd, the sanity of humanity is kept going is like this. The ordinary people, ordinary civilized people, promote the idea that good taste, that we should have good taste, and they use it without knowing it as a cover for having to think, which is a full description of civilization, if you can hear it, comma, while lounge lizard rebels, you can say lounge lizards, slow-witted artist, same thing, they offer up being offensive as a substitute for good taste. If that got too complex, that runs in, what do you call? A toilet bowl. No, a circle. A circle. Civilization promotes good taste in the full sense of the word. Being civil, being decent, being considerate of one another, which is fine. But if you can ever begin to see it, it is also a blatant attempt to cover up for not thinking. That's part of what morality is. That's part of why you have books on etiquette. And you can, from one view, you can read it and it says you should always refer to an unmarried woman in France as such and such. Or you should always write thank you cards for anyone who gave you a gift on such and such these occasions, or on such and such person who visited you under these certain conditions. And you could read that from one view and go, well, that's crazy. Or to find out that under a social class outside of yours, that people go through a certain ritual, that they'll interview somebody such and such way, and you bow. The whole rituals of being civilized. You could look at that and go, what does that mean? Who in the world came up with this? Who is Miss Manners or Emily Post to tell me what to do? Of course, you're forgetting the great cosmic ventriloquism act. But what that does is cover up. It is a substitute for having to think. It is also, on a wider scale, what all rituals are. You mean including religious rituals? What are you, deaf? All. Any kind of ritual, your own ritual, is an excuse, is a cover for not having to think. Because once you get in the habit, you have rules at work, you have rules in society, you have rules in your religion, and it is a cover for having to think. And if you extract the specifics such as cultural, religious, etc., it gets down to this. It's good taste. What is being civilized? Being decent. Exercising good taste. The news item points out, the ordinary promote good taste, but they do it without knowing it as a cover for having to think. But to balance it out, there are those that seem to be within the bowels of the herd, figuratively speaking, of society, those that seem to want to shake a fist. Lounge lizard rebels, it says here. All right, their reaction to good taste is what? Offer up offensive actions, drawings, paintings, music, maybe just a face, as, this will show them, as a substitute for good taste. Of course, the lounge lizard rebels, if they were sitting and prepared to hear this, they would go, that was not the way that sentence should have ended. Let us back up and see if you see any connection about the would-be thinker. Somebody actually trying to think outside the collective intelligence. And if anybody tries that, somewhere along the line, they certainly run across, in the West, known as mysticism. Purported to be the inside, secret, serious people's guide to religion. Core is hidden within Islam and Buddhism, and Christianity, and Judaism. That inside is serious people. They're not fooling around with their diet or going to church or paying money. That they are actually down to the operational, pragmatic aspect, the secret aspect of religions. Mysticism. So this guy, all guys who's ever, anybody got this far, somewhere you ran across the idea of mysticism and enlightenment, and at some time you spent some matter of minutes, hours, months pursuing that. At least dreaming of it, which is good enough, cheaper. And you read some kind of description that this news item relates, that mysticism, and whether somebody got it through extensive drug use, meditation, sitting, or just the guides favored you and you were enlightened. And the description is a new union a coming together between a man and reality. God, that'll get you. Because I could run with it. I'll make it fly. Not that they need my help. But it sounds just right. And you've all read enough without me spending a lot of time, the idea that you no longer feel separate from the cosmos, whether it's in a religious sense or otherwise, but a union. The enlightenment is, I am part of the universe. I am an intricate part of the universe. My mind is not something that's just stuck on as an afterthought. My soul is not just some little something that was just thrown in like, well, like they're going to buy a new car, give them an AM radio. That my soul was just thrown into reality. So it is a feel like an experience, a discovery that I am joined to infinity, to reality, to the cosmos, but a union of a man and reality. All right. Except for the unnoticed question of how in the holy hell did somebody think that they were separate to begin with? I don't want to spoil anybody's fun, but it's obvious that you people never made it that far to have that kind of fun and now are going to get the red ass about it. But think about a man, he'd been, and I know they get delighted, they write books and they can put on robes and come back home to where they left from and make, a few bucks and lecture. But a man has sat there for 40 years and been whipped with wet noodles and insulted by some foreigner and kicked around and made to wash out toilets. And after 40 years of sitting there and torturing himself, no family, no friends, he reaches this moment that strikes him, real enlightenment, that I, in reality, are one. You know I don't try to step on people's peckers. But just think about, wait a minute. You mean for the last 40 years you thought in some way that you were just like an add-on or just something that got thrown into reality? Which they obviously do. But it does not take someone to move over to Japan or Pennsylvania and try to seek enlightenment. Everybody feels that way. So this guy, this would-be thinker, obviously bypassed, at least he saved himself according to the news item and my humble interpretation thereof, he saved himself at least that fictional 40 years because this guy reads about it. And at first I'm sure he thought, hey, that sounds enlightenment. Yeah, I'll accept that. That's what I'm after. And they say that enlightenment, the payoff is going to be that a man, they describe enlightenment, it is a new union or a union between a man and reality. And he thinks, I'm not so sure that what I'm after is some kind of additional joining up with something. Which is another way of the man saying, something is seriously amiss here. That I'm going off and spend 40 years following this kind of course to find out that, yes, I am here in the midst of a herd. No man is an island. God, write that down. Well, assuming that you have a waterproof pen and can read it later. We've already had and concluded tonight's moment of, if you remember, metaphysical sarcasm. So don't be laughing, because the point of a union with reality is as old as humanity's been talking. And I was not being flippant when I said I could make that fly. That would sound like the one reasonable interpretation or description of what it would be to be able to think in some outside manner. To realize that the universe and I, reality and me, we're inseparable. But again, look at it another way. How in the hell can anybody sit there that can think and start off on that premise? Now everybody does, but as soon as it's pointed out to you, which I pointed out to you for the last 5 minutes, it shouldn't take me 30 seconds, if somebody realized, yes, that was true, I thought that until you pointed out, and I realized, boy, something stinks worse than Denmark, that hadn't had a bath in 2 weeks. That is fishy in a manner unbelievable. Why would somebody try to join up? Why would somebody try to return home when they've never left? Why would you try to join a club when you look down and 2 or 3 of the first pages are just filled with your name. Well, you and your family, but there you are. And you spent 40 years trying to get in. I mean, it's a hobby. Like trying to keep your car clean every day of the year. There was a news item somewhere, it's obviously didn't come through reasonable sources, that described mysticism as busy work. But we could do this. Just turn it just a little bit, just turn your head. You could describe this as busy work. Don't guess we should dwell on that, should we? Now, I mean for your sake. Slaves are always serious when they speak of their master. I bet nobody cares to hear anything about that. Well, there was a little something, since there were several tonight, about seriousness. But this one says, at least you overlook just that which is point blank. I'll give you some example. Instant enlightenment doesn't take 40 years, it's just point blank, but it's easy to go, what? Tyrone, could you come? We need some more water. And you just overlook it. To wit. Rather than worrying about people being dumb and people being serious and all these news items about what it is to be serious, and the serious always having the weak always being serious, and the serious always being stupid, and the stupid always having to be serious when they speak of their master and worry about who's pulling the strings. The question, the point blank question, is quite easy to overlook, is what else can the dumb be but serious? The dumb being everybody of collective intelligence with no offense to them. It's just so we can talk about it and call them one thing. Call you one thing when you're being collectively conscious. At that level, what can you be besides serious? Why is it so easy, if you're outside the tent, to piss inside on religion and culture and art? All you got to do is be one of these hanger-on rebels. Lounge lizard rebels. Somebody just hanging about and just every now and then trying to poke fun. Trying to be a critic without portfolio, a critic with no responsibility. Why is it so easy to take the serious things in life, that is, everybody else? Let's assume that you are a half-baked critic. You're an artist with no talent. And so you try to make fun of life. Rather than think, rather than come up with anything original, you just look at everything else that everybody else seems to consider holy, sacred, reasonable, interesting, and all you do is go. And you call it, you would go along, you could say, yeah, dumb. And it's so easy with that kind of small group of people within the herd, they're not necessarily certifiably committable, because they can hang out in the herd and still get by, and just kind of on the weekend be sort of a weekend smartass. But look how easy it is to take all of these serious things in life, all these sacred, holy, civilized, cultural things, and make fun of them. It doesn't take much intelligence to make fun of literature. You don't have to major in literature to make fun of Chaucer or Shakespeare. Somebody can be hanging around Central Park and then performing Shakespeare, and some guy with a 5th grade education can turn to his buddy with a 4th grade education and not even really understand what's going on and make a joke and make fun of what's going on. Or they can walk certainly into an art museum and make fun. They can go into church if they're not religious, or go into a church that's not from their background, and whoever they are, laugh at them. And to get other people to laugh. Why is it so easy to make fun of that which seems to be necessary, mainstream, acceptable in life? Here's why. The question, how else can the dumb act but serious? What are you going to do? There was another one that didn't get brought in that had to do with, we've covered news items about it, and I'm not sure that it hit your ears correctly tonight or in the way in which it was intended. And it started out as like somebody saying, bartender, bring us a straight round over here to my friends. No chaser, just bring it over straight. That was the lead-in. The lead-in was, if you have any feelings of regard or reverence greater to any part of collective life, any part, and the examples it gave was your culture, your nation, your country, your state, your race, your religion, your sex. Yeah, I shouldn't even bother with that. But everything before that about covered, I just want you to understand there is no exception. But if you have any reverence, if you hold to yourself any part of your background, I don't care what it is, what religion you are, what race you are, if any of that strikes you in any way, which if you're ordinary, of course it will, but if it strikes you in any way to be reverence, to be worthy of reverence, and you hold it in higher regard than you do your own mind, you got your glasses so we can all, you're a friggin' cow. There's no way out. You are part of the collective. You're reasonable, you're sane, but that is again one of the absolute crucible points or pots of trying to see how this diverges, how a man's mind would diverge, and it's no criticism of religion, much less any particular religion, but it's not even criticism of anything going on in life, because life needs to keep going. You should, as always, everyone be in favor of it. But if anything, any part of the collective life of man, any aspect of culture, religion, art, politics, culture, race, religion, nationality, if there's any spark in you that you hold higher than you do your own thinking, you're a cow. That's it. It's not that there's anything wrong with it, but if you think more of your mother than you do you, if you think more of your race than you do you, one more time, if you're ordinary, hell yeah you do. Or even if you didn't think you did, if you're ordinary, you couldn't say otherwise. You're not supposed to. If you tried to pull this on an ordinary sane person and say, do you think more of your religion in general, just answer me quick, than you do yourself, the person would have to say, well, yeah. Because if they didn't, they'd have to say, well, my religion means nothing. A man's religion has got to mean more to him in toto than just he does, because he's infinitesimal compared to his religion. That's why he needs it. If you say, do you think more of yourself than you do your whole race, your nationality? Any sane man's going to say, well, certainly not. And that's insane to say so. I like me. I don't have any great problems with me, but my goodness, I don't think more of me individually than I do my whole illustrious culture, my past, my rich history. They're supposed to. But have a drink. You're a cow. Nighty night.